Hello, queens, and welcome back to the Lashes and Sashes podcast. Oh, I'm so excited. I wanted to first start with the most commonly asked question, and it's pretty funny because it normally has a very commonly stated answer. Elizabeth, what is the number one pageant advice you would give? And then the answer. Be yourself. Okay, so be yourself in pageant advice, or I guess the number one pageant advice, is the equivalent of world peace as the answer for Miss Congeniality. I think it is true. I do want world peace, and I especially want people to be themselves. And honestly, yeah, it is the most important pageant advice for anyone stepping in. But because I think it's so often said, and I know for me, I'm quite the overthinker. I remember when I first heard that, and if you're in the pageant space too, I'm sure you've also heard that from people. Be yourself is so overwhelming. Like, what does it mean? Because, truth be told, there is a certain level of society conforming that we need to do in the pageant space. So, there is certain rules like in gown, you should have part of your evening gown, if there is an evening gown portion of the competition, touching the ground. That's just pretty standard in the pageant world. But maybe being yourself isn't having a floor length gown. Well, too bad. Like, that's just how the pageant world works. Or, you can wear your short dress and evening gown. You probably won't win. And again, I say probably because you never know. It's very subjective. So, when it comes to being yourself, I think it's really focusing in on, if you were to put a Venn diagram, it's your strengths and the things you love. I would say very often the things you love are also your strengths, but in case they're not, where there's the overlap, focus on those. And when it comes to things you love, especially if you're a younger pageant girl or you're a mom with a daughter that's going into pageants, you're so young. You're just trying to figure out who you are and what you like, and things can change over time, really. I know for me, I started pageants when I was 8, but it wasn't until I was about 13 that I got more competitive, that I started exploring other hobbies and activities. And my key to finding the stuff I enjoyed in my life was what were the things that didn't put me to sleep, because I fall asleep really easily. I was really salty in high school because I was voted most likely to fall asleep in class. And mind you, I was relatively not so much, but I was a decently smart cookie. Like, I got a 5.1 GPA, okay? And I, really tried, and I identified as a huge nerd. So I'm like, you're telling me that my colleagues consider me like a sleepyhead? Are you nuts? But they did have a point. Like, I did fall asleep very easily. Blessing and curse. And when it came to classes that I really enjoyed in college, I changed my major 3 or 4 times, but I remember in my marketing class, it was 8 in the morning, and that professor had the most monotone voice in the world. And I loved it. I could listen to him for hours. I was wide awake. I did not need snacks to keep me up while I was in the class. I just found it so interesting. I loved learning about brands and segmented marketing and target markets. Like, I just thought it was so cool. And I realized I had a passion for marketing. And, that's just one example. But even for pageants, what's something that you can talk about for hours and hours and maybe you have friends or significant others or family members that kind of tune you out once you keep on rambling about it. If that is something you can't stop talking about, odds are you love it. Or my mom and I, we used to have this charity modeling event called Model for Miracles. Hopefully, we'll put it back soon. We'll see. But it was to raise money for Children's Miracle Network. And we connected all of our pageant networks in the Central Florida area into this one Model for a Day event. And I just remember I had one night where I only slept for 2 hours and I didn't even notice. So, again, the sleeping thing, because I was so excited. I was so eager to put this event together, to get everybody involved, to answer questions from future models or contestants or hair and makeup artists or photographers, and bring all of this together, because I realized then not only did I have this passion for the pageant community, but event planning. I absolutely loved everything that entailed with the event planning side. So, all this to say is, when sharing who you are, another misconception is that there is a certain way of pageant patty. And sure, we can argue the floor length gown is a level of pageant patty, but I think pageant patty is more, you want to say what you think pageants or judges or society wants you to say. So maybe you think the answer is world peace. I think a big thing for those really involved in the pageant community is seeing the pageant sponsors or the pageant mission and things, and trying to align who you are with those sponsors and that pageant. And I think to a certain extent that does make sense. So let's say, for example, Miss America, they're involved with the American Heart Association and Giovanni. So I think you should at least advocate for those things if you are planning to be a future Miss America. But does that mean your whole personality is the American Heart Association and Giovanni? No. The current Miss America, she is just doing so well. She looks amazing. But her story and her message for pancreatic cancer after her mom passed with it, it shows that you can also promote both what the Miss America organization entails and what you as a title holder or a contestant or even as a person stands for. So I think a lot of it has to do with your brand. For me, a big thing that I identified with for my years competing at Miss Florida USA was trash fashion. I realized, one, I started my nonprofit, Teens Go Green, when I was 12. So it's just kind of grown on me, and I've just kind of grown up with my nonprofit. And really where I got the most attention and conversion for people to volunteer or make efforts to cut their waste was when I wore outfits made out of garbage. So that's when I decided, okay, like, it's trash fashion time. That's who I am. And that is really what led me to be on TLC and TEDx. I didn't make top 5. I did make top 15, but I don't think that would have really mattered my placement wise, because I wore a gown made out of garbage for my pageant competition. So branding that, showcasing that, getting a random viral TikTok, and then, connecting with my pageant community again for the opportunity to speak at TEDx, like, those two things, again, never even thought would be possible. It's a dream come true, but I didn't even see myself able or qualified to even fit that dream. But in truth, I am more than a trash fashion person. So it gets a little bit complicated when you say be yourself, because there's so much about you. You're trying to fit either in a 2-minute interview, a 10-minute interview. So what are the things that make you unique? What makes you stand out? And for me, I guess too, it's also the fact that I am an Asian American. So people are interested when I tell them that, yeah, like, I speak Chinese, Cantonese, and I can also speak some Spanish. So just figuring out what is it like. And it's great, because I think when you're a kid, you are so desperate to fit in and be what everybody sees as cool or normal or whatever. But in reality, it's your differences that make you stand out, that make you unique, and that make you brandable and reachable and relatable. So I'm so glad that even in certain ways, like I stand out as one of the very few Asian girls competing in a pageant, or I stand out as the girl wearing garbage gowns. And one of those years I wore a garbage gown, I even had a pirate leg crutch because I sprained my ankle and snapped two ligaments. And, I think that's the embracing your differences. And even if you think you are the most basic human being alive, you're like, oh my God, I am just cookie cutter and like everybody else. That's okay too. I think you can embrace your basicness, embrace your love for me, I guess my basic things are millennial core. I love all the Disney Channel movies. I still only watch Disney Plus. So showcasing those unique personalities about you and really owning up to it and being proud of who you are, and still continuing to discover what makes you unique, what do you stand for, what are your values. And we can go into another subject later on about pageant platforms and social impact initiatives. But I think in terms of what be yourself means, another point is to think about where did you grow up? How were you raised? And how did it make you the person you are today? So I can see, some people that are small town girls. Or for me, I grew up in suburban Orlando. So I'm a total Disney adult. And within my Orlando space and community, that might be normal. But if I'm competing in an international pageant competition, that totally stands out like a sore thumb. So if you think about what types of competitions that you're in, and really recognizing, or hey, maybe you moved from another city or you came from another area, and how did that make you the person you are today? Because I think there would be a big difference for me if I actually grew up or was born and raised where I live now, which is in Miami, or even the difference between like city Miami versus suburban Miami versus kind of rural and farm plant-based Miami. Not plant-based like vegan. I hope that makes sense. So think about where you're from, what you stand for, your values, and what makes it different and special. And I think that's one of the best takeaways from pageantry too, because it leads to a lot of self-awareness and introspection. I think in our society today, between like cancel culture and whatever, like there's not a lot of space for self accountability and saying like, hey, what I did was wrong, or maybe I shouldn't have done it that way, or looking back, I think, I don't want to say back in my day, but back in my day, there was that stigma towards mental health and therapy and those types of things. But I still feel like there is a stigma towards admitting you are wrong or at fault and being proactive about it. I feel like oftentimes we don't see people apologizing or taking ownership of their mistakes, whether it's in media, entertainment, honestly, even politics, but I'm not going to go there, about, hey, I messed something up. I'm sorry I did that, and this is what I should do instead. And I don't know if our society's ready for that type of accountability and introspection, but at least when you're personally preparing for pageants, it is great for your own personal development. Who you are, why you are the way you are, what you stand for, what makes you unique, what makes you stand out. I would say like now with ChatGPT and stuff, sure, you can probably get examples of good answers or good sounding answers, or if you're a kid, like what your mom suggests to be a good answer, but you must always tie it back to who you are and what you stand for. It doesn't have to specifically be a trash fashion related thing or a pancreatic cancer related thing or whatever, but it could be one element of who you are. For me, again, I have so many different things that I'm trying to connect right now through Lashes and Sashes, of my modeling, web design, trash fashion, public speaking, and I can't package all of that into a 2-minute interview. But if the question comes up, then I can tie it back into who I am and what I stand for. So I hope that does help. But if you have any questions or thoughts or advice on that, I'd love to hear. Please feel free to send an email at lashesandsashes@gmail.com. Thank you.